echoes of war are never far from us. 80 years on, the pain of World War II still lingers.
我们每一个渺小人物的惨烈的命运被历史遗忘了。
大家都知道犹太人大屠杀，但南京大屠杀很少有人知道。
From Pearl Harbor to Nanjing, from the Thames to the Songhua River, we visit the places where the worst of humanity happened and discover where the Great War really began. This is the first time in my life that I've ever witnessed and held in my hands evidence of war crimes.
American-European arguments that China has done nothing to defeat the Japanese. Actually, it's done a lot. Of course, it's trapped Japan.
Past atrocities leave scars that demand remembrance.
二度と戦争にならないような世の中にしていきたいなというふうに思ってましたので。
The darkest chapters of history shed light on the future. Today's world thrives on a post-war order. Now, more than ever, countries are closely connected.
我们是希望跟全球的科技公司还有高校都是技术成果共享。
我希望我们能把我们自己的英雄故事传出去。
The choice, confrontation or collaboration. In a divided world, are we capable of making the right choice, of embracing prosperity and lasting peace? Join us for the documentary, The Unsung Ally. For most Americans, this is where the Second World War began.
December 7th, 1941.
On December 7th, 1941, 353 Japanese fighters and bombers raided the U.S. Pacific Fleet based at Pearl Harbor. The U.S. president at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, famously claimed,
A date which will live in infamy.
This is the USS Arizona Memorial. It's here to commemorate the more than 1,000 sailors who died on the ship that day. But the attacks on Pearl Harbor would claim more than that. The attacks drew the United States into the Second World War, the deadliest conflict in human history.
A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
By this time, the war on the European battlefield had been burning for the third year. While the Chinese had insisted on independent resistance against Japan for 11 years. The aggressive activities of the Japanese army created countless horrifying tragedies in China. The sinking of a cargo ship revealed to the world the degree of brutality taking place in the Far East.
That was in September of 1942.
83 years ago, in these very waters on the eastern shore of China, the Lisbon Maru was torpedoed and began to sink to the bottom of the sea. The Japanese soldiers fired at British soldiers desperately trying to escape. Brave fishermen from Zhoushan risked their own lives to successfully rescue 384 British prisoners of war. The fate of these British soldiers was almost a forgotten chapter in the war. Even in their homeland of Britain, the story was not well known until a Chinese documentary film burst on the scene. For the British, this is the first time they've seen this story on the big screen. All of this is thanks to Chinese director Fong Li, who spent 10 years and invested 50 million yuan to bring this story to the screen.
On stage.
So I'm really honored, to be a storyteller about your family.
Almost no one knows about it, and it's a very, very important incident. And when Fang Li contacted me to say he was making the film, I was absolutely delighted. And I wanted to do everything I could to help him make the film and bring the story to life so that people all over the country, and indeed all over the world, could hear about it.
Before watching this film, I had no idea about this connection between these British prisoners of war and this remote Chinese island, and how these villagers really stepped up in a time of need. This is a story that's just so powerful. It's told with dignity, heart, and most of all, it's a story about truth. Two months later, I met him in his Beijing studio. He told me the biggest challenge was to trace those survivors because this incident was almost completely forgotten.
They are forgotten. They are all the families, they never connected. Now 600 families connected.
Wow.
They have a group.
Wow.
Because our advertisement, you see this advertisement?
Yes, yes. Amazing.
Crazy Chinese came over here and got in for 5 weekends, full page.
Wow.
So that's why it was really, it worked.
It was so great because you actually found a survivor through the advertisement. At first, Feng Li found the search for eyewitnesses frustrating. Few Westerners were aware of what happened to the Lisbon Maru. Feng Li and his team spent nearly 9 years searching for the truth for the 2,071 Chinese and British families, bringing this long submerged history to light and sharing these forgotten stories with the world.
每天我们都在眼泪中间度过的，每一个家庭你去采访，都是让人心碎的故事。就这种战争下面，我们每一个渺小人物的惨烈的命运被历史遗忘了，所有的生命就这样的消失了。你一辈子都忘不了他们的泪眼，他们的哽咽，他们的唏嘘，他们的悲伤，它永远长在你脑子里。
Professor Hans van de Ven from Cambridge University is a renowned authority on Chinese history. For him, it's no surprise that the pivotal role China played in the Second World War is largely missing from Western narratives.
The Second World War in China by a previous generation of Western historians was seen as sort of completely insignificant. I think there's a real Eurocentrism to Western, and I mean English language writing, mostly from the US and the UK, where it's very victor-centric, claiming a moral superiority because of what their great-grandfathers did.
在今天我们来回顾，80周年的时候回顾这个事件是有意义的。至少中国军民在自己这么艰难困苦的时候，仍然是不顾一切去协助盟军。
Behind those names, there are sons, daughters, wives, brothers, and sisters. While Feng Li followed faint traces through the fog of history, those British families felt a pull towards the story's long silence, towards memories of their loved ones, resting beneath the tides of the East China Sea. The majestic Songhua River flows through the center of Harbin, China.
I'm here on the banks of the Songhua River, which reminds me so much of the mighty Mississippi in the United States. Two rivers so rich in history. This one, of course, runs through the city of Harbin. There's a song about this river here in China that everyone recognizes. It references the date September 18th. One of the things I've been reading for this documentary is this book, Blood and Ruins, and another one here, World War II and Global Perspective. What makes these books so interesting isn't necessarily the titles, but it's the dates, 1931 to 1945. Not the Western start date of 1939, no, 1931, when the fighting began here in China.
It began in northeast China in 1931. A war of resistance involving over 400 million people, accounting for a quarter of the world's population. In the ruins of a construction site in Harbin's southern suburbs, the marks of war are deeply etched. One of the worst atrocities during World War II was hidden here.
I think we're all familiar with Auschwitz, the notorious Nazi death camp where so many people ended up on train tracks going to their deaths, either by firing squad or the gas chamber. But what many people don't realize is 4 years before Auschwitz was even created, these tracks, half a world away, would take people to the buildings right over there. What was their fate once they were inside? And why is it that story is not known in the West?
Visiting the Japanese Imperial Army Unit 731 Evidence Museum provokes a range of intense emotions, from sadness to anger. Every exhibit demonstrates the atrocities that took place here. The casualties of this savage brutality were known as the Special Transfer Victims.
We can see this is the special vehicles for special transfer. They were killed by means of experiments on human bodies. No one can survive.
Unspeakable, ghastly ways.
Yes.
他们这些人都通过一种特别移送的方式运送到清朝部队，那么他从此就已经失去了生命的迹象，那么都被冠以马路大。什么是马路大？就是被剥了皮的原木，已经没有生命了，所以他都有给他了一个数字编号。
Coming here was a death sentence. None of the victims of the special transfer survived. The sheer scale of what happened is overwhelming. People trapped here endured horrific torture and were subjected to brutalities that defy imagination.
通过我们的调查取证，可以看到清朝部队做着很多泯灭人性的实验，比如说细菌注射实验、冻伤实验、真空实验、毒气实验，在这里都能够得到有效的考证。比如说，只给吃的，不给水；只给水不给吃的，挑战人能够活多久，它都在挑战人体的极限。
Hideo Shimuzu was a former youth member of Unit 731.
私はネズミのお尻から原液を取って培養して。
標本室で何を見ましたか？
いくつもお腹から出た赤ちゃんだってありますし、お腹に入ってるまんまの時の標本もあるし、ありとあらゆる標本がほとんどありましたからね。大人そのやつまでってあります。この標本もこの心臓はどういう病気でこうなったという説明書いてあるから。
Crimes against humanity are not just acts of war. They strip away any sense of humanity. They obliterate any semblance of human ethics.
特别移送档案最具有代表性的、核心的罪证，究竟有多少人被移送至清朝部队，用作人体实验？ 它只是一个数字问题，但是它犯下的这种泯灭人性的、违反人类伦理道德的行为，已经被印在了历史的耻辱柱上。
If these valuable archives had not been made public, the names of the victims would have long been forgotten, and the persecution they suffered would also have been permanently buried in history. And the Japanese here were waiting for a moment when they could use their years of gruesome human experimentation on a real battlefield. Beginning in 1940, the Japanese army decided to wage bacteria wars in southern China. The largest one was after the Doolittle Raid. On April 18, 1942, 16 B-25 bombers conducted the attack on Japan. After the raid, the bombers either crashed or made emergency landings within Chinese territory. 64 U.S. crews were successfully rescued. They escaped danger thanks to the daring joint efforts of the Chinese government, the military, and civilians. Following the operation, Japan lashed out in retaliation. The Japanese army directly launched the Juzhong Jiangxi campaign,
May to the end of September 1942. About 250,000 Chinese civilians would die.
They would also carry out ghastly and cruel bacteriological warfare in Zhuzhou.
The bacterial warfare directly resulted in approximately 50,000 deaths among Chinese military personnel and civilians. It was the largest scale, most systematic bacterial warfare used during World War II. Before Japan's surrender in 1945, Unit 731 began its evacuation. But the Japanese wanted to make sure the keepers of the secrets never spoke of the horrors here.
言うことを言われちゃってる。だからそれを言われるとバレちまうという頭があったんだと思います。私に青酸監視と拳銃を渡されたの。捕まったら即座に自決しろと。
Before they fled, they eliminated Chinese detainees and destroyed all the evidence, including labs and equipment.
你好 Professor
欢迎来到731。看看这个，这个就试管，这是完整的试管。
Wow. One of the tubes.
这个是木炭，这里为啥有木炭呢？就是当时他把这个木材放到底下烧完之后呢，往火上扔，这样的话呢，才能彻底毁灭这个罪证。
This is it. Evidence of war crimes resting in my hands. Obviously, the Japanese went out of their way to destroy any evidence, and that's exemplified here. And yet the weight of those souls rests on your shoulders as you stand here. We must remember these forgotten stories, or we are doomed to repeat tragedies like what happened here. Everything about this is solemn. As you leave here, etched on the wall, testimonials, confessions really from the Japanese soldiers who were here and witnessed the atrocities. There's a statement here at the museum, don't look back, look forward. Ahead, there is light. I think that symbolizes really the deep value that the Chinese people place in this concept of peace. And around the country, young people are working hard right now to strengthen that value of peace and to spread that message around the world.
这当时的这个栏杆是老的吗？这应该也是新的吧？
这个原来没有这个，
没有就外面这层。
这个有，对，没有。
其实就这么花纹
的，没有装饰。不是，我是说，就是整个这个全都是有的，是没有这个花纹。
这花纹是吧？哦，
之后贴上去。
A group of Chinese game developers are conducting on-site inspections in this Russian-style town, which is only a 4-hour drive from Harbin. The protagonist of their game is a soldier of the Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army. This was one of the earliest Chinese forces to take up arms against the Japanese. Under the leadership of the CPC, its struggle lasted for all 14 years. It started right after the September 18th incident in 1931 and stretched right up to the victory of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression in 1945. In the game, players need to carry out raiding missions on key railway hubs to sever the Japanese Army's transportation lines.
我们这个故事其实是表现的一个东北抗联抗日题材的一个游戏的一部分。 我们要通过现在这些采集的一些结果，然后进行分析，最后做出还原度非常强的历史感的东西，来保证大家有一个非常好的沉浸感。
What they did was just the initial stage of game development. The development team is continuously advancing this work in Hangzhou, China.
这就是我们当时在黄道河子采风，我们认为非常有意义的一个场景。我们采风之后，我们会把这些非常有意义的一些历史场景全部都复现到我们的游戏里面。 刚才那是瞄准，这边的这个箭是射击。对
啊。Hopeless. Let me try again. From Call of Duty to Battlefield 1942, numerous classical video games are based on World War II and have won the hearts of global players. Players can choose many roles in first-person shooter games, but it never occurs to American players like me that none of the protagonists are Chinese soldiers. It's something I realized spending time with Kong.
是不是感觉非常难
Help me. Oh, nice. Have you ever seen a game that contains Chinese battlefields? Most of them are in Europe like this, right?
我就一直在想，什么时候能做一款专门讲述中国的战争英雄这种游戏。我的爷爷是一个老八路军，他是鲁南骑兵团的一名老战士。从很小的时候，就是经常听他跟我讲他抗战时候的一些作战的一些故事，包括我们小时候每年清明节我们都要去烈士陵园扫墓，碑廊是上百米长的墙。 上面密密麻麻的刻着的都是牺牲的人的名字，这每一个名字背后都是一段故事。
Because China was at war, collecting data was difficult, so we may never know the exact cost of the war. But according to incomplete statistics, the number of casualties among Chinese military and civilians exceeded a staggering 35 million, accounting for approximately 1/3 of the total casualties in the worldwide conflict.
This was a fight to the death, and everybody knew it, and people were, of course, horrified by all that was going on, but this was something that had to be done.
China 过去呢，应该说是一盘散沙。我觉得第二次世界大战呢，对中国人的启蒙是全方位的，不仅仅呢是这个唤醒了中国人民的民族精神，而且对于我们中国的现代文化，对于我们中国现代国家的塑造，也是至关重要的。
China, an impoverished rural country, was lagging far behind the Japanese invaders in almost every way, from military equipment to national strength. But its people did not surrender. When Mao Zedong wrote on protracted war in 1938, he gave confidence to his people. He predicted the outcome, writing that the war would be a long and tough one, but China would win in the end.
That makes the Second World War in China really about defending a Chinese nation, a Chinese country, a Chinese civilization.
Throughout World War II, the Japanese army deployed 7.2 million troops. On the Chinese battlefield, the army killed, wounded, or captured more than 1.5 million Japanese soldiers, accounting for a quarter of the total number. There were 3 super battles that had over 1 million soldiers from both sides fighting on Chinese soil.
中国战场是世界反法西斯战争的东方主战场，我们抵抗了日本陆军的大部分的兵力，日本就放弃了向北进攻苏联的计划，也大大的延缓了它向南、向东南亚发起进攻的进程。
The national identity forged in the 14 years of resistance is still influencing Chinese young people today. From an undercover agent in Shanghai to guerrilla combatants in the mountains, Kong Yu Hong is realizing his dream of enabling Chinese players to do what their American counterparts have been doing for years, to play as their own heroes.
在2024年9月14号，我们发布了第一个产品的 PV， 在 B 站上，玩家给我们的评论确实也收获了不少的鼓舞。有的玩家会说，只要你们对得起先辈，玩家就一定对得起你们。还有类似，中国早应该有这样的游戏了。
This game will fill the gap in this genre in the Chinese gaming market.
我们自己的战争英雄，他们需要被人记住，我们也需要去传播他们的故事，因为我们看过太多的好莱坞电影，我们玩过太多的欧美的游戏，讲的都是他们的英雄。现在我们有了这个能力，有了这个实力，也有了这个机会，我希望我们能把我们自己的英雄故事传出去。
What's your hope for the game? That it's very successful, that it teaches people about this history, that an international audience learns more?
为了做这件事情，我们可以放弃我们之前的高薪，可以放弃我们这些年的安逸。我们认为做这件事情是值得的。当它成功的那一刻，那才是对我们最大的回报。
These developers have been working on this ambitious project for many, many years. And as you can imagine, this workforce is very young. So they've grown up playing games. But what drives them is something much deeper. They're trying to tell a story about history largely overlooked in the West. So if all goes to plan, in 2027, gamers around the world will have the chance to put themselves in the shoes of resistance fighters here in China. So this is a game that's much more than bombs and bullets. It's about memory, identity, and resilience. From the eastern coast of the Himalayas, heroes of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression fought against the invaders on land, at sea, and in the air. But this poverty-stricken country needed international support.
By thousands, by tens of thousands, by hundreds of thousands, they toiled at the back-breaking task of carving this desperately needed supply line out of the reluctant mountains.
They built the Burma Road in 1938, a lifeline that transported over 90% of the international supplies into China. And the Americans carried out an historic aid mission with thousands of flying tigers combating the Japanese in the sky, protecting the Burma Road, And they also flew over the Himalayas to transport goods.
From fields in India, an air transport command plane takes off every 6 minutes, loaded with artillery, jeeps, ammunition, men and supplies for the armies of China. Over this Burma skyway, over this hump of mountains 16,000 feet high, more tonnage is being flown into China than was ever trucked in over the old Burma Road.
Over 2,590 American crew members died in those missions. China also sent its best troops to aid the Allies in the war. In Yunnan, China, the heroes of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression are visited daily. People from all directions come to pay their respects. In April of 1942, the Japanese Army launched a full-scale invasion of Myanmar. To rescue the British troops there, China sent its best-equipped army of 100,000 soldiers to the jungles of Myanmar. They did this despite the dire situation they were facing as they fought the Japanese army on the domestic front.
It's a war they're going to lose, that's quite clear in the beginning. But they're very important in protecting the British retreat.
For the Chinese soldiers, this was a doomed mission. 60,000 Chinese soldiers of the 100,000 deployed would be killed. Among the numerous battles, there was one momentous victory. In Yenongyong, Myanmar, over 7,000 British troops were surrounded by the Japanese army. They were backed into a corner, and yet a small unit of 800 Chinese soldiers repeatedly charged up the strategic high ground, breaking the Japanese encirclement. The brutal war was far from over, and the second expeditionary campaign was launched 2 years later. In June of 1944, the Battle of Songshun unfolded in these mountains. The fierce fight lasted for 95 days and is considered one of the most brutal battles in the history of the Chinese Expeditionary Force.
这些都是松山的核心区嘛，相当于是日军的一个火力覆盖范围了。到这个位置呢，就是松山的主峰，也叫子高地。右手边这张照片呢，就是当时44年咱们远征军8月30号攻克松山爆破的时候，随军记者拍下的当时起爆的一个画面。在爆破的这个位置呢，就是咱们这个松山的主峰了。松山这2个主堡轰炸掉以后呢，咱们远征军就一口作气攻占了这个子高地。
This fierce battle ultimately broke the defense system of Western Yunnan, playing a key role in the reopening of the Burma Road.
这个桥呢，就叫汇通桥，也是抗战期间的，在这条抗战生命大动脉上投放的物资啊，超过45万吨。在我这个桥的左手边呢，还有一座桥，叫红旗桥。 是20世纪70年代修建的，这座桥呢也是可以说见证了咱们这个新中国建立以来的发展。而在我们的右手边呢，有一个很大的一个江湾，有一座新建的大桥，叫大瑞铁路的怒江4线特大桥。这座桥建成以后，随着大瑞铁路的通行，就可以通过缅甸、辐射、南亚和东南亚，从而 实现一带一路的实施。
Past, present, and future stand side by side over the Nujong River, bearing witness to 3 eras of China. From the chaos of war to economic takeoff, from brave resistance to the responsibilities of a major power, whether in the past or present. The country has consistently contributed Chinese solutions to global security issues. This is Dongji Island in China. Where descendants of the British and Chinese survivors of the Lisbon Maru rescue have arrived. And Denise Nguyen is here for the gathering.
It was exactly his grandfather.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
The
yeah.
3 British POWs right exactly here.
Wow.
藏在这下面。
Exactly right.
就最早回去的就那个3个。
The 3 British POWs who came back in the first batch.
I think the Chinese fishermen who looked after them and fed them and kept them clothed and kept them until they were able to escape, I think they were just incredible people. They were very, very brave.
This year marks the 80th anniversary of the victory of the World Anti-Fascist War. We gather here on Qimbang Island, united by compassion and remembrance, to unveil the memorial for Dongji Fishermen's rescue of British prisoners of war.
Hello, everybody, and I'm the daughter of Dennis Morley, 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots. He was the last survivor of the sinking of the Lisbon Maru until his death in 2021, aged 101 years.
In May of 2022, Denise wrote a letter to the President of China, expressing her desire to establish a monument to commemorate the brave Chinese fishermen and celebrate the deep friendship between the peoples of China and the United Kingdom. 3 months later, she was honored to receive a reply from President Xi.
I was thrilled. Today, alongside the monument, feels surreal, and I am pleased that it will be here for future generations to learn from, and also to celebrate the friendship between the Chinese and British people.
I kept thinking my daddy was coming home and he didn't. My mother used to say, he might be on the next.
Peace has always been the main message that China has sent out to the world. And today, upholding world peace remains one of humanity's shared missions. Like any other nation, China's crucial contributions and significant sacrifices in the Great War should not be ignored. There's an old saying, you can never make the same mistake twice, because the second time you make it, it's not a mistake, it's a choice. By documenting the ugliness of war and guarding the legacies of civilizations, we can ensure we don't repeat history. In the next episode of The Unsung Ally, please follow me on a journey to discover the stories of people who are asking the question, what can civilizations do to avoid more tragedies?